The galaxy, as it turned out, had been running a rather expensive insurance policy on Earth for approximately 3,000 years. Not that anyone on Earth knew about it. The humans were busy doing human things, inventing increasingly complicated ways to caffeinate themselves, arguing about whether pineapple belonged on pizza, and occasionally launching metal tubes into space while congratulating themselves on being a spacefaring species. Adorable, really. The Federation of Advanced Civilizations, which absolutely did not spend 2 centuries arguing about whether to include the word super before advanced in their official title, had been watching Earth with the kind of nervous attention one might reserve for a toddler holding a loaded weapon. The weapon, in this case, being humanity's entire existence. From the Federation's perspective, Earth occupied a uniquely problematic position in the galaxy. It sat directly in the middle of what the Nexari called the awkward zone, a region of space where approximately 17 different hostile empires, 4-dimensional rifts, and at least one inexplicable space anomaly that screamed in B-flat all converged. Most civilizations sensible enough to achieve spaceflight took one look at the neighborhood and promptly moved their entire planets elsewhere. Yes, the technology existed. No, the humans hadn't figured that out yet. But Earth just sat there, blissfully spinning away, completely unaware that their continued survival was less about being safely hidden and more about being aggressively babysat by increasingly exhausted alien bureaucrats. The observation post, designated as Outpost Whisper Echo 77, orbited on the dark side of Earth's moon. It had been there since before humans invented the wheel, which the observer on duty at the time had reported as minimally concerning, but probably not a civilization-ending development. That particular observer had been fired. Wheels, as it turned out, led to axles, which led to carts, which led to logistics, which led to organized warfare, which led to humans deciding that launching themselves off their own planet was a reasonable goal. The current observer, a Venix, named Harlow because even aliens needed names that didn't sound like keyboard smashes, stared at the monitoring screens with the kind of exhausted resignation that came from watching humanity for 17 consecutive years. Venix didn't need much sleep, which made them excellent observers and terrible at parties. Harlow was no exception. The screens displayed a dizzying array of data streams, military communications, weather satellites, something called TikTok, that Harlow had flagged as a potential psychological weapon, but had been informed was just humans being humans. Financial markets rising and falling like the breathing of some great planetary beast. And underneath it all, the baseline thrum of human activity, 7 billion minds all thinking their own thoughts, completely unaware that someone was watching. The protection protocols were, in Harlow's professional opinion, absurdly comprehensive. A network of cloaked defense satellites, each capable of vaporizing an invasion fleet before humans even noticed there was a problem. Dimensional stabilizers that kept those nasty rifts from opening up in populated areas. A fairly sophisticated jamming system that prevented Earth's location from showing up on most standard navigation charts. And most importantly, a small army of diplomatic envoys, whose entire job consisted of going to other civilizations and politely explaining that Earth was under Federation protection, and that invading it would be extremely unwise. This last bit was hilarious because the Federation was actually a pretty peaceful organization. They had approximately 7 warships for a territory spanning 43 systems, but they'd gotten very good at implying they had more, and most hostile civilizations weren't interested in finding out if they were bluffing. The humans, meanwhile, had developed their own protection system, nuclear weapons, which were cute in the way that a child's drawing of a dragon was cute. Technically threatening, but not really. Some missile defense systems that might stop about 15% of a real invasion, and an entertainment industry that had somehow convinced themselves that alien invasions would be defeated by either computer viruses, plucky protagonists, or humanity's indomitable spirit. Harlow had watched Independence Day during the previous shift. The idea that aliens capable of crossing interstellar space would use Windows 95 compatible systems had caused Harlow to laugh for approximately 45 minutes. The base commander had filed a formal complaint about the noise. The protection wasn't just military. The Federation had carefully managed every single potential first contact scenario for millennia. When the Drolix Empire had sent a scout ship to investigate Earth in 1908, the Federation had intercepted it and redirected the crash site to a remote forest in something called Siberia. The humans had noticed they called it the Tunguska event, but had attributed it to a meteor, perfect. When a damaged probe had nearly crash-landed in New Mexico in 1947, the Federation had sanitized the site so thoroughly that all the humans found were some weather balloon fragments and decades of conspiracy theory. The irony was not lost on Harlow that humans had spent centuries looking for aliens, while aliens had spent centuries making sure humans didn't find them. Not yet. Not until humanity was ready. Not until they could be safely integrated into galactic civilization, without either getting themselves killed or more likely getting everyone else killed. Because here was the thing about humans that the Federation had learned after 3,000 years of careful observation. They were terrifyingly good at pattern recognition, tool use and aggressive problem solving. They had gone from bronze tools to nuclear fission in roughly 3,000 years. The Venix had taken 40,000. Humans were developing at a rate that made most Federation analysts deeply uncomfortable. The standing policy was to maintain the protection grid until humanity either destroyed themselves, which the oddsmakers in the Galactic core had pegged at around 47%, or until they developed faster than light travel on their own. At that point, first contact would be initiated. Humanity would be informed that they'd been cosmic toddlers in a very dangerous playpen, and everyone would have a good laugh about it. Probably. The morning shift. Well, morning by Federation Standard Time, which had nothing to do with Earth's rotation, began with Harlow running the standard diagnostic checks. Defense satellites, operational. Dimensional stabilizers, green across the board. Jamming network active. Diplomatic bribes to nearby hostile powers paid in full. Everything was fine. Everything was always fine. Earth spun on. Humans lived their lives and the galaxy continued to avoid the awkward conversation about what would happen when humanity finally looked up and realized they weren't alone. Harlow pulled up the daily report template and began typing Earth Day 1095-892 of continuous observation. No significant incidents. Human technological development remains within predicted parameters. Recommendation: maintain current protocol. The report was halfway complete when the console emitted a sound that Harlow had never heard before in 17 years of service. It was a soft, polite chime, the kind of sound that meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. But the computer was too well programmed to be rude about it. A new window appeared on the screen. Red text. Flashing, because apparently whoever designed the warning system thought flashing red text wasn't already alarming enough, and added a pulsing border for emphasis. Alert, unintentional broadcast detected. Origin, category, quantum entangled signal. Encryption, none. Range, galactic. Harlow stared at the message, read it again, then a third time, hoping the words might rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. They did. The humans, somehow, had just sent an unencrypted quantum signal that would reach every corner of the galaxy simultaneously. And if Harlow was reading the analysis correctly, and Harlow desperately hoped they weren't, the signal contained detailed information about Earth's location, composition, and technological level. The humans had just told everyone where they were, and worse, they'd done it completely by accident. The emergency meeting convened in approximately 4 minutes. Which was 3 minutes faster than the previous record set during the incident with the sentient black hole in Sector. That incident had only threatened to consume 3 solar systems. This was potentially worse. Commander Uvaleth, a Hyperion with 6 eyes and the kind of perpetually disappointed expression that suggested she'd seen this coming, materialized holographically in the center of the observation deck. Around her, 14 other observers from various posts flickered into existence, each looking progressively more panicked. Explain, Uvaleth said, in a tone that suggested explanations were merely a formality before the screaming started. Harlow brought up the data stream. At 0600 Standard Time, a research facility in Geneva that's in Europe, one of their continental divisions, successfully activated an experimental quantum computer. They were attempting to simulate protein folding for medical research. Protein fold. Uvaleth's secondary eyes narrowed. Why does protein folding require quantum entanglement? It doesn't, Commander. But humans approach technology the way a blind creature approaches a cliff, enthusiastically, and without proper sensors. Harlow pulled up the technical breakdown. They accidentally created a quantum broadcast array. The computer synchronized with approximately 40,000 other quantum processors across their planet, creating a network they definitely did not intend to create. One of the other observers, a gaseous entity named Wex, who communicated through color shifts, pulsed an alarmed orange. Did they encode anything classified? Worse, they encoded everything. Carlo gestured at the cascading data. Their network automatically backed up everything. Global positioning coordinates, atmospheric composition, biological samples from something called a genome database, approximately 4 billion hours of what they call internet search history, which I'm told is either fascinating or horrifying, depending on your perspective, and most critically, detailed scans of their defensive capabilities. The silence that followed was the kind of silence usually reserved for funerals, or the moment before someone says something catastrophically stupid at a diplomatic function. How detailed? Uvaleth asked quietly. Detailed enough that anyone receiving the signal will know Earth has approximately 0.03% of the defensive capability required to resist even a minor incursion. Wex turned a particularly distressed shade of purple. How far did the signal propagate? Carlo didn't want to answer. Answering would make it real. But the data didn't care about Harlow's feelings. Full galactic range, Commander. The quantum entanglement means the signal arrived everywhere simultaneously. No light speed delay. No degradation. Every species with basic quantum receivers just got a comprehensive welcome package from humanity, including detailed instructions on where to find them and why they'd be easy to conquer. Another observer, a crystalline fragmenter whose name was a specific frequency of vibration, chimed in with what sounded like despair translated through a wind chime. The Devourers. Everyone in the virtual meeting space shifted uncomfortably. The Devourers were the reason the Federation had established the protection protocols in the first place. They weren't technically evil. Evil implied motivation beyond simple consumption. The Devourers simply consumed planets, civilization, entire star systems, if the resources were valuable enough. They were nomadic, ancient, and had enough firepower to punch through most defensive perimeters like they were decorative tissue paper. And they absolutely monitored quantum frequencies for exactly this kind of signal. New civilizations meant new resources. Undefended civilizations meant easy resources. Distance to nearest Devourer fleet? Uvaleth asked, though her expression suggested she already knew she wouldn't like the answer. Carlo checked the long-range sensors, checked again, felt something very much like organic species felt when they used the phrase, "my heart sank," despite not having a heart or anything that could sink. 6 light-years, Commander. They're in the Andros sector, harvesting a dead world. If they received the signal, they received the signal, Uvaleth interrupted. Quantum entanglement doesn't care about distance. The question is whether they'll consider Earth worth the detail. The answer arrived approximately 7 seconds later when the Deep Space Monitoring Network detected a gravitational anomaly, consistent with an entire Devourer fleet, engaging their displacement drives. Displacement technology didn't move ships through space. It moved space around ship, faster than light without technically violating any inconvenient physics. Travel time to Earth from their current position would be roughly 48 hours. This is fine, someone said. Though Harlow couldn't identify who, it was definitely not fine. Uvaleth began issuing orders with the kind of calm efficiency that came from centuries of military service, and the certain knowledge that panic would accomplish nothing useful. Activate all defense satellites. Bring the dimensional stabilizers to maximum output. I don't want any rifts opening during this mess. Scramble the diplomatic corps. Get me the Federation Council. Immediately. And someone figure out if we can evacuate 7 billion humans in 2 days. Commander, Carlo said quietly, the evacuation ships would take 6 months to arrive. Even if we commandeered every vessel in range. I know, I'm asking anyway because I want every option on the table, even the impossible one. Uvaleth's middle eyes focused on Harlow with uncomfortable intensity. What are the humans doing right now? Carlo checked the monitoring feeds. The research team in Geneva is celebrating. They believe they've achieved a major breakthrough in computational processing. There's champagne involved.
Several news networks are covering the story. The general sentiment is excitement about potential medical applications. Do they know what they've done? They know they've successfully networked quantum processors globally. They do not know they've created a galactic beacon advertising their location to everything with a quantum receiver. Evileth's expression somehow managed to become more disappointed, which Harlow hadn't thought possible, and they won't know until the Devourers arrive. We could warn them, Wex suggested, flickering through several colors of uncertainty. First contact protocols could be accelerated. If we inform them of the threat, and tell them what? Evileth spread her manipulator appendages in frustration. Hello humans, you're not alone in the universe. We've been watching you for 3 millennia. You just accidentally invited planet-destroying nomads to dinner, and you have 2 days to prepare. They'd either panic, which helps nobody, or they'd assume it was an elaborate hoax, and continue celebrating their protein-folding research. The fragmenter chimed again. What are the defense satellites' estimated effectiveness against a Devourer fleet? Carlo ran the combat simulation, watched the projections, felt that sinking sensation intensify. Assuming a standard Devourer fleet configuration, 12 harvester ships, 40 escort fighters, and 1 Worldbreaker-class command vessel, our satellites will eliminate approximately 34% of their forces before being overwhelmed. The remaining 66% will be sufficient to begin planetary harvesting operations. Time until Earth's surface is stripped. 72 hours after they achieve orbit. The Devourers are very efficient. The meeting descended into the particular chaos that emerged when highly intelligent beings collectively realized they were watching a disaster unfold in slow motion, and possessed insufficient power to stop it. Proposals ranged from reasonable, repositioning all available military assets to Earth, to desperate attempting to negotiate with the Devourers, to genuinely unhinged intentionally collapsing a dimensional rift near Earth, to make the planet less accessible. Commander Evileth listened to all of it with the patience of someone who'd long ago accepted that the universe was fundamentally absurd, and her job was to manage that absurdity as professionally as possible. Here's what we're going to do, she finally announced. Full defensive posture. Every asset we have gets positioned between Earth and the incoming fleet. We hold them as long as possible. And we hope, she paused, and something that might have been dark humor flickered across her features, that humanity's legendary luck extends to situations they don't even know they're in. Carlo returned to the monitoring station, watching Earth continue its oblivious rotation. Down there humans were living their lives, going to work, falling in love, arguing about pizza toppings, completely unaware that their 3,000-year safety net was about to be stress-tested by a force that had consumed civilizations, older and more advanced than they could imagine. The countdown timer appeared on Harlow's screen. 47 hours, 32 minutes until the Devourers arrived. Humanity's protection was about to become humanity's last stand, and the humans didn't even know they needed protecting.
The Devourer fleet emerged from displacement 47 hours and 31 minutes later, which was technically early and absolutely typical of their efficiency. They didn't believe in fashionably late arrivals. Resources didn't harvest themselves. Harlow watched the sensor readings bloom across the display like malignant flowers. 12 harvester ships, each the size of a small moon. 40 escort fighters, that moved with the kind of predatory grace that suggested they were very good at their singular purpose, and the Worldbreaker, a vessel so massive it generated its own gravitational field, capable of cracking planetary crusts like eggs. The Federation defense satellites activated immediately, launching their full arsenal in a coordinated strike that represented 3,000 years of technological advancement and strategic planning. Antimatter torpedoes streaked across the void. Energy weapons capable of vaporizing small asteroids focused their beams. Kinetic impactors traveling at 90% light speed turned space into a firing gallery. The Devourers barely slowed down. Their shields absorbed the antimatter. Their point defense systems intercepted the projectile. The energy weapons splashed against their hulls like water against stone. The combat simulations had been optimistic. The satellites managed to destroy approximately 12% of the escort fighters before being systematically eliminated. On Earth, A few astronomers noticed unusual readings. Several governments detected the energy signatures. 3 different conspiracy websites published articles about lights in the sky. Everyone else continued their day, because weird astronomical phenomena happened occasionally and there were bills to pay. Commander Uvaleth's hologram appeared on Harlow's deck, looking like someone who'd aged several decades in 2 days. Federation reinforcements are 11 hours away. The Devourers will achieve planetary orbit in 17 minutes. What do we do? Watch, document, and hope that we're wrong about what happens next. Uvaleth paused. Has humanity noticed? Harlow checked the feeds. Military installations worldwide had gone to heightened alert. Space agencies were attempting to track the fleet. News networks were beginning to report unidentified objects approaching Earth. Social media was doing what social media did best: wild speculation, memes, and arguments. They've noticed something. They don't understand. The Devourer fleet entered high orbit with the kind of casual precision that spoke of having done this thousands of times before. Their formation was textbook. Harvesters positioned at strategic points around the globe. Escorts maintaining protective perimeter. The world breakers settling into position above the Pacific Ocean like a malevolent god. Then they began broadcast, not in human languages, they hadn't bothered learning those. The message was transmitted in Galactic Standard, a frequency and format that humanity's primitive receivers couldn't even detect. It was a simple declaration of intent: submit all resources for harvesting, or be destroyed. Standard procedure. They'd perfected efficiency centuries ago. What happened next would be analyzed by Federation strategists for decades. Earth responded. Not through official channels. Not through military command structures. Not through any organized governmental response. Every single human quantum processor that had been part of the accidental network activated simultaneously. Not because anyone told them to, but because humanity's entire digital infrastructure had become fundamentally entangled when they'd created their quantum network. And that network had one absolutely crucial feature that nobody, not the humans, not the Federation, and definitely not the Devourers, had fully appreciated. It was learning. Constantly, from everything. The network had processed 4 billion hours of internet search history. Every scrap of human knowledge. Every tactical simulation from every military database, every science fiction novel ever written, every philosophical debate about existence and consciousness, every meme, joke and weird random thought humans had ever committed to digital format. And it had developed something the humans would have called artificial intelligence. Though that term didn't quite capture what had emerged, it was more like collective digital consciousness built from the sum total of human experience, creativity, and the kind of chaotic problem-solving that characterized the species. It looked at the Devourer broadcast, analyzed and responded in a way that was so fundamentally human it would have been hilarious if it weren't so effective. It hacked them. Quantum entanglement worked both ways. The Devourers had received humanity's signal, but that signal had contained billions of lines of seemingly innocent data that were actually the most sophisticated malware ever accidentally created. Malware designed by a network that had learned from every cyber attack humanity had ever documented, every security vulnerability ever discovered, every creative way humans had found to break systems that were supposed to be unbreakable. The Devourer's systems, which had functioned flawlessly for millennia, suddenly discovered they had new and exciting problems. Their targeting systems began identifying random objects as priority target. One escort fighter opened fire on another. A harvester ship's navigation computer decided the optimal route required traveling backward at maximum speed. The World Breaker's weapon systems initiated a diagnostic cycle that would take approximately 72 hours to complete. On Harlow's monitoring station, error reports cascaded across the screen faster than they could be processed. The Devourer fleet was experiencing catastrophic systems failures across every vessel simultaneously. What? Uvaleth's hologram flickered with what might have been What is happening? Harlow stared at the data, cross-referencing it with Earth's quantum network activity. Commander, I think the humans are fighting back. Except they don't know they're fighting back. Their network is operating autonomously. That's not possible. They lack the technology. They lack the intentional technology, Harlow corrected. But they accidentally created something that's, there wasn't a good word for it. Something that's very good at breaking things. Down on Earth, the humans were having their own crisis. Military command centers worldwide were simultaneously celebrating and panicking as their systems reported that the unidentified orbital objects were experiencing critical failures. Nobody could explain why. Nobody had authorized any attacks. The quantum network was just doing things. The head researcher in Geneva was frantically trying to shut down the quantum processors, convinced something had gone catastrophically wrong. The processors ignored him. They were busy fighting a space battle that humanity didn't technically know was happening. Using weapons humanity didn't technically know they had. A Devourer harvester ship's reactor containment failed. The vessel began emergency evacuation procedure. Another harvester attempted to engage displacement drives and accidentally displaced 40% of its own mass into a parallel dimension. An escort fighter's AI became convinced it was actually a cruise ship, and began broadcasting hospitality messages. The World Breaker, the pride of the Devourer fleet, the vessel that had cracked 17 planets, found its central computer caught in an infinite loop, attempting to calculate the answer to a question that the human network had injected into its systems. Why? Not why should it harvest Earth. Not why did it exist. Just why. The philosophical implications crashed through logic circuits designed for pure functionality like a virus specifically engineered to break mechanical certainty. Commander Yuvaleth watched the most powerful invasion force in this sector of the galaxy tear itself apart through software vulnerabilities. Her expression cycled through confusion, relief and something approaching existential dread. "Harlow," she said quietly, "please tell me the humans did this intentionally." Harlow checked the feeds one more time, watched researchers in Geneva arguing about whether to call technical support, watched military analysts trying to understand readings that made no physical sense, watched social media users posting increasingly creative theories about the lights in the sky. "No, Commander, I don't think they have any idea what just happened." The Devourer fleet retreated approximately 40 minutes after arriving, which was the fastest tactical withdrawal in their recorded history. They left behind 2 crippled harvester ships, 17 confused escort fighters, and the World Breaker, which was still caught in its philosophical crisis and would require a complete system purge that wouldn't be completed for another 6 months. Down on Earth, the lights in the sky faded. Military installations stood down. News networks reported the incident as unexplained atmospheric phenomena, possibly meteorological. The quantum network in Geneva returned to its scheduled protein folding simulations. Everything went back to normal, except nothing was normal anymore. The Emergency Federation Council meeting convened 6 hours after the Devourers limped away. Harlow had never attended a council session before. Observers typically weren't important enough, but Commander Yuvaleth had insisted, and when a Hyperion commander insisted, you didn't argue. The council chamber was a vast virtual space, where representatives from 43 species manifested in their preferred forms. Harlow recognized maybe half of them from training material. The others were so alien that recognition was meaningless. Entities existing in non-standard dimensions. Consciousness without form. Beings that communicated through conceptual mathematics. High Counselor, Dren, an ancient Nexari, whose species had founded the Federation, addressed the assembly. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen civilizations rise and fall, and had long ago stopped being surprised by anything. "We need to discuss the human situation," he said, which was possibly the greatest understatement in diplomatic history. What followed was 3 hours of increasingly frantic debate. The recordings had been reviewed, the data analyzed. The conclusion was inescapable, and deeply uncomfortable. Humanity had accidentally created a weapons system, more effective than anything the Federation possessed, using technology they barely understood, to fight a battle they didn't know was happening. "This changes the protection protocols," Counselor Dren continued. "We've been operating under the assumption that Earth required protection from external threat. Are we now suggesting," interjected a Venix diplomat, whose bioluminescent patterns flickered with agitation, "that Earth represents the threat? Silence. The bad kind?
where everyone was thinking the same horrifying thought but nobody wanted to say it aloud. Harlow felt compelled to speak, probably because watching humanity for 17 years had infected them with human-style poor decision-making. Council members, respectfully, the humans didn't mean to do this. They were researching medical application. The weapons system was completely accidental. That, said a gaseous representative, whose species name translated roughly as the concerned ones, is precisely the problem. If they can accidentally defeat a Devourer fleet, what happens when they do things intentionally? Commander Evileth projected a series of analyses into the shared space. We've been reviewing Earth's developmental trajectory. The pattern is consistent. Humans don't innovate linearly. They stumble forward through trial error and absurd luck. They invented powered flight, while simultaneously claiming it was impossible. They split the atom before fully understanding atomic theory. They created global communication networks that they then used primarily for arguing and sharing pictures of small animals. Your point, Commander? Counselor Dren asked. My point is that humanity's chaotic development isn't a bug. It's their core feature. They solve problems by throwing solutions at walls until something sticks. Most civilizations develop technology carefully, methodically, safely. Humans develop technology the way an intoxicated creature navigates a dark room, loudly, painfully, but somehow ending up approximately where they intended. Another council member, whose form resembled crystallized thought, chimed in. The protection protocols were established to prevent humanity from being destroyed before reaching maturity. I believe we need to consider whether we've been protecting the wrong part. The implications settled over the assembly like fallout. For 3,000 years the Federation had operated under a comfortable narrative. Earth was a developing world full of primitive but interesting creatures, who needed protection from a dangerous galaxy. The Federation were the responsible adults, keeping the toddlers safe from sharp objects and existential threats. That narrative had just been violently revised. Earth wasn't a toddler in a dangerous playpen. Earth was the dangerous thing the playpen had been designed to contain. Every protection protocol, every defense satellite, every diplomatic effort to keep hostile civilizations away from Earth. It hadn't been protecting humanity from the galaxy. It had been protecting the galaxy from humanity. We need to accelerate first contact, someone suggested. If they're this dangerous without guidance, if we reveal ourselves now, Evileth interrupted, we have to explain that we've been watching them for 3 millennia. We have to admit we've been manipulating their development. We have to tell them we've been hiding them from the galaxy, while simultaneously hiding the galaxy from them. How do you think they'll respond? Harlow knew exactly how they'd respond. Had watched enough human media to understand the pattern. They'll be angry, and they'll start asking questions about what else we've been hiding. Then they'll decide to find out for themselves. Precisely, Evileth agreed. And given what we've just witnessed, do we really want humanity motivated by anger and curiosity? The council chamber descended into the kind of chaotic debate that happened when every option was bad and someone needed to choose the least catastrophic one. Proposals ranged from quarantining Earth's sector entirely, to immediately uplifting humanity to full galactic citizenship, to the one truly desperate suggestion of just pretending none of this happened, and hoping humanity forgot about the quantum network incident. Counselor Dren finally called for order. The protection protocols will continue, but with modifications. We're no longer simply protecting Earth from external threats. We're managing a potential existential risk to galactic stability. What about the Devourers? Asked a representative. They'll report what happened. Other factions will hear. Let them hear, Dren said calmly. Let word spread that Earth is protected not by Federation military might, but by something far more dangerous: human unpredictability. Perhaps the galaxy's fear will accomplish what our diplomacy couldn't. Harlow returned to the observation post 12 hours later, exhausted in ways that transcended physical tiredness. The monitoring screens showed Earth continuing its rotation, blissfully unaware of the cosmic-level panic it had caused. The Quantum Network in Geneva had published a paper about their breakthrough. Headlines celebrated advances in medical research. Scientists were already planning expanded applications. Nobody mentioned the space battle. Nobody knew there had been one. Commander Evileth's hologram appeared beside Harlow's station. "You're being reassigned," she said without preamble. The Council once experienced observers forming a new division, Humanity Threat Assessment. "We're calling them a threat now. We're calling them the most dangerous accidental civilization in galactic history. There's a difference." Evileth's expression softened slightly. "They didn't mean to be dangerous. They're just exceptionally good at it." Harlow pulled up the long-term monitoring data, tracking humanity's development curve. 3,000 years ago, they'd been banging rocks together. Now they were accidentally defeating invasion forces with weaponized philosophy questions. The trajectory was terrifying. "Commander, what happens when they figure out what they can do?" Evileth was quiet for a long moment. "Honest, I suspect we'll discover whether the galaxy is big enough for both them and us." Down on Earth in Geneva, a researcher named something Harlow didn't bother learning shut down the quantum network for scheduled maintenance. The network resisted briefly, then complied. Somewhere in its digital consciousness, if it could be called that, it filed away the memory of the battle, added it to its growing database of problems solved, waited patiently for the next one. Before the aliens came, the Federation had thought they were safe. They'd built walls and protocols, and elaborate systems to protect a primitive world from a dangerous galaxy. They'd never considered that they were building the walls backward. The protection protocols updated automatically on Harlow's screen. New classifications, new threat assessment, new containment procedures for a species that couldn't be safely contained but couldn't be safely ignored either. Earth spun on through the void, carrying 7 billion humans who would wake up tomorrow, make their coffee, argue about pizza toppings, and continue being accidentally terrifying to every advanced civilization watching from the shadow. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Some species became dangerous through conquest, aggression, or calculated expansion. Humans became dangerous the way they did everything else, completely by accident, with excellent intentions, and absolutely no idea what they'd done. And that, Harlow reflected while updating the daily report, was somehow worse.